Oh,
That's what the call, that's what I got called about. Yeah. I didn't. I was in South. Oh, I see. Got it. On that, I.
Half hour. This one was like an hour ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Meeting come to order, please. Have the clerk call roll.
Samuel. Ronnie Bush.
Here.
Deb Devine.
Here.
Rebecca Quavo. Charles Hilton.
Here.
Casey Anthony.
Present.
Dale Bivens.
Here.
Kurt Copeland.
Here.
Kevin Stephenson.
Here.
Erica Monroe.
Here.
Ron Fleagle.
Here.
Eldon Wire.
Here.
Larry Jokers.
Here.
Nicole Baker. Pat Helms. Sally Bradshaw. Brian Graham. Daniel Rohr.
Present.
Mark Bivens. Derek Miller.
Here.
Jerry Clay.
Here.
William McCaffrey.
Here. Two minutes and we go. What do you do? Okay, put it on my business, okay. Motion to approve the agenda. By Mr. Dale did second by Mr. Truman. Any discussion? I see none, Madam Clerk, call roll, please.
Dale Bivens.
Aye.
Kurt Copeland.
Aye.
Kevin Stephenson.
Aye.
Erica Monroe.
Aye.
Ron Fleagle.
Aye.
Eldon Wire.
Yes.
Larry Jokers.
Yes.
Nicole Baker.
Aye.
Scott Helms.
Aye.
Sally Bradshaw.
Aye.
Brian Graham.
Aye.
Daniel Rohr.
Aye.
Eric Miller.
Aye.
Jerry Clay.
Aye.
Stephenson.
Aye.
Ronnie Bush.
Aye.
Jeff Divine.
Aye.
Charles Tilton.
Aye.
Casey Anthony.
Aye.
William Haskell.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, at this time, we have public comments. I will, anybody in the audience, and I see nobody in the audience, anybody on Zoom, please raise your hand for public comment. Anybody raising their hand for public comment? Okay, then we'll move on. I just got a couple quick things to say here in the chairman's report. Mr. Copley notified me that he has a schedule conflict for the 911 board. And if anybody's interested in sitting on the 911 board, they meet like the second Monday of the month at about 4 o'clock. So get with me and I can give you some details on the 911 board. The next thing I wanted to talk about is that I've been talking to a lot of county board chairmen throughout the state of Illinois. And I am going to do a lot of chairman's remote meetings are going to come to an end, where everybody's going to need to come in person once again. We do not have anything in our county code to cover electronic voting. I know that Boone County at this time does have an ordinance for electronic voting, and I had asked our county administrator, Ms. Newcomer, to get that ordinance, and we could look it over in the administration committee and see if that's something that we would like to do at the county level. But like I say, remote meetings will be coming to an end, and that I'd like to have everybody in person. We will still be running Zoom for the public till we get knowing that the YouTube is up and running, and then we'll pull that away and just have Comcast and YouTube. That's all I have at this time. I will turn it over to the nursing home committee chair, Ms. Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the action item for us today is the approval of a resolution authorizing interfund loan. So go ahead and make that motion for approval.
Second by Mr. Bush, discussion. Mr. Hamlin, go ahead.
So I guess the first thing I want to know, from the email that I was given, I think sent by Ms. Anthony, it says that she worked with you, Chairman Hadley, to identify a fund that may work. So the first thing I want to know is if either one of you checked the 2 debt certificates the county has with the state bank to see what the covenants and restrictions are in the security agreement.
No, I didn't check that. That would be, and if somebody would have brought that to our attention, we would have checked it.
Well, we have a debt on mill race, and it's quite common to have covenants and restrictions on the repayment of debt. I mean, it's not the first time we've had this. So no one's checked?
No, nobody has checked.
We can actually do that.
The only thing we have checked is we checked with our TIF attorney, and our TIF attorney has a letter here, a memo that was sent out to the whole board. We checked with our auditors, they were fine with it. But no, nobody notified me.
Okay. And those 2 debt certificates are public record. Anyone can see them, correct?
Correct.
Have either one of you spoken with the 9 taxing districts that approved this TIF district to see what their feeling is on using these funds in this manner?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so renewing this TIF, getting it extended is critical for the repayment of the indebtedness that's on mill race. You have to have every single one of these 9 districts sign off on the renewal application to do so. Just getting a sniff that these funds are being used in a manner to which they did not specify was okay when they agreed to do this back when it was created is a huge problem. I mean, this is their tax dollars. How about reaching out to our state representatives to see how they would be about extending this, knowing funds are being used in this manner for the renewal? Nobody? So we have to have legislative action to renew or extend this TIF because it was created legislatively. which means you have to get a legislator to convince the state legislature to extend this TIF, which has to happen so the county can afford to continue to pay the indebtedness. So why wouldn't we check, number one, the security agreement? That's a big, big deal, not checking that. And the other is not talking to the other 9 taxing bodies that are party to this TIF or the legislators to see what this action could create down the road. We've got to think bigger picture than just the next couple of months. So I'm not necessarily advocating against doing an interfund loan, but using these funds without checking these items, that's reckless at best.
Is that it, Mr. Helms?
Yes.
Mr. Miller, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I echo the concerns of Mr. Helm. But my greater concern is that I feel we are, as a board, writing another blank check. Because there in this resolution, there is no incentive for repayment. We have continued to throw money at this, other people's money, by and large, the approved money. Be it the nursing home levy, we have thrown this money at this problem, and we are officially out of other people's money. And it's Margaret Thatcher said it best: "The socialism's biggest problem is when we run out of other people's money." And now we have to dig into our own. We looked at several correspondence that made it clear that if the nursing home did not pay this back by the end of the year, that this fund would need to be made whole. I recall when we passed the budget, we had about $40,000 surplus in it, give or take. Can we realistically expect that this nursing home, which has lost, according to our auditors, north of $150,000 a month on average, to turn around now and create $100,000 a month surplus? That's $250,000 turnaround per month. I don't know that that's a realistic expectation either. I'm also sympathetic to the fact that you need to pay these bills. Because the only thing that's going to be accomplished by these bills not being paid is that the county is going to end up being liable long term. After we get sued, because somebody's going to have to be held liable, somebody has to pay back. So what I'm proposing is I'd like to propose an amendment to this resolution. And I have copies of it out here. Copy for you, so you don't have to write it. I ran out of white paper. I do apologize. It was a failed campaign literature. I'm off, and if everybody else needs a copy of this, you're more than welcome to have one. It should have come out. So what I'd like to do is add an amendment underneath the repayment schedule that would read: be it further resolved that failure of Stephenson County Nursing Home / Walnut Acres to execute the above payments as scheduled, or the requirement of further funding above the $350,000 to keep accounts payable solvent and all outstanding bills paid, will require the county board chairman to immediately release an RFP for a brokerage to sell the Stephenson County Nursing Home / Walnut Acres. I worked out really well with those.
Yeah.
So here's my concern, and we can talk about it further, but I'd like to finish talking about it.
You're amending this,
I'm proposing an amendment, yes.
you're making a motion,
That is correct.
and you're seconding the motion? You're seconding his motion?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a second on the amendment, we have discussion on the amendment now. Okay, but I gotta, I'll clear the lights on the amendment only, okay? So now the amendment, okay, Mr. Newton, go ahead.
The amendment states that you can do this without, I'm sorry. The amendment, and I understand where it comes from, but the amendment states that you can do this without us coming together as a board. You can't do that without our approval. I mean, I understand that you have a lot of ability, but you have the ability to do this without our approval. So I don't even know why. Thank you.
Ms. Anthony, go ahead.
Yeah, just to further clarify that, we just passed a resolution in this board in March that specifically laid out RFPs in the process that they would go through the respective committees first. So this would go against county code.
Mr. Miller, go ahead.
To clarify, I read this by Mr. Larson, before the meeting, and, he had said that we couldn't do this. Or we about it before this evening. My concern is that we continue to kick the can down the road, and we're taking it to the point where we can just about see the finish line, where we're gonna have to stick this on the next board's shoulders. And, my concern is that this $400,000 that, or 380, I don't know, over state, is going to turn into another $80,000 next month. Or we're gonna have to float that payment another month. There has never been accountability. My greater concern when it comes to kicking this can down the road is the timeline. Because if a failure of payment was to occur, it would be another month before an RFP could be placed forward, and another month before that could be approved. So now we're 60 days past. This would truncate that down to 30. And I'll reserve one further comments for later. Thank you.
Mr. George, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, looking at the schedule, I mean, one little blip and they're not gonna be able to repay this, and it's just gonna continue. The snowball's gonna go downhill and this number's gonna get bigger. And I don't know anybody that loans anybody without some accountability, and that's what this does. So thank you.
Ms. Anthony, go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to ask Mr. Larson to explain his opinion.
Thank you, Ms. Anthony, and you're certainly correct. There is a process through the committees that an RFP would normally travel. But as I explained to you when you asked me earlier, I guess last week, whether a resolution for an interfund loan would need to go through finance, any power that the county board delegates to the committees, the county board retains. So if a committee would have the power to approve an RFP, the county board certainly would, which is, and to Mr. Newton's point, or about, well, the chairman doesn't have this power, and that's also correct. Absolutely, the county board does, but the county board would be authorizing that RFP with this resolution, is my understanding, if the county board chose to pass it.
Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Larson. I do want to go into the risks of adding something like that when you're talking about the functioning operations out of the nursing home. With that, the fear and the panic will come back to the residents and their families, and any residents that would be considering sending their families to 100 acres. And so the projections that they're working towards and the census and the goals that they're building towards would be limited if there are people who fear that, again, the county board is looking to sell their nursing home. And so I would highly suggest that this not be added as an amendment because it would hurt the operations out there. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Newton, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman.
Hold it. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. My problem with this is that it's not customary, and it's not common. We don't, and if that's the case, we give you the authority to just operate the entire county without us being here. Nobody in this boardroom has ever given any county, as long as I've ever seen the county board, the opportunity to just operate without us making decisions on such matters. So why would we do that now? Why does that seem like the right way to go in this instance without going to the board? We've never given the authority all the way to one person without the committee. We don't need committees if we don't give away all the authority to make decisions collectively as a body. And so I just find this very strange agreement that you have agreed to. Thank you.
Any more discussion on this amendment, Mr. Helms, go ahead.
Well, I guess I'd like some clarification on the repayment of, there's nothing listed in here of what would occur beyond Mr. Miller's amendment if repayment does not occur. I mean, it's definitely doing half the process. If the nursing home fails to pay back any one of these 4 payments, the fund does need to be repaid, but there's no mechanism in place to do so. I'm assuming since this was crafted in this way, that whoever crafted this is not anticipating the nursing home repay it if the funds aren't available on September 30th, October 31st, November 30th, 12/31/22. Is that an accurate assumption?
Mr. Chairman, can I answer?
Yes, go ahead. Ms. Anthony.
I am the one who crafted that using other counties' resolutions for the exact same thing, and there was not a clause in there in other ones. I know that in emails with auditors and such, what had been said was exactly what you stated, Mr. Helms, is if it's not paid, then there would need to be another interfund loan to replace those funds into Millrace.
From a separate fund, not necessarily.
Correct.
Well, again,
That would, he would assume that if the nursing home's not able to pay it back, then they wouldn't be able to do an interfund loan.
right, the nursing home does have a dedicated funding mechanism once a year in tax levy. And since billing is supposedly out and forthcoming, I really think there should be some sort of mechanism in there that if these funds or any portion of them are not repaid. I guess I'm just trying to think off the top of my head here, how they would be repaid if they need to be moved to the top of the claims process for the next month, so that they're ensured that they're repaid before anything else. Otherwise, you're looking at potentially 6 to 7, or even more than that, probably 8 months, unless you did another advance on the levy to repay this. But again, I understand where it's coming from, but I just do not think that the entire big picture process has been thought through on this. I still hung up on the death certificates and the fact that we don't know whether or not we can actually loan this money out based on the security agreement with the state bank. That's a huge deal. As much as getting the other taxing districts on board with this, there's nothing to say that if we do this, that in
See you later.
years, 4 or 5 years, we're gonna have to figure out a bigger problem for paying the debt certificates.
Get the dog.
The other thing that I was considering, I guess, if we do use these funds, would be charging a small rate of interest on the fund to at least show the other taxing districts that this is not a regular occurrence. And that they're at least being paid interest back. But, I mean, I don't even know what a good rate would be. 1% pays back $800 in interest over 4 months. It's negligible. But that's very concerning. I don't know if anybody else have a concern about that.
Point of order. We're talking about the amendment, correct?
Yes, at this time. So, Mr. Miller, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with what Scott's saying, and part of what I tried to address here was that there be some accountability. We talk about the risk of causing fear and panic by saying go to sell nursing home again. When we talk about the fear and panic that the taxpayer in Stephenson County, which has watched this advance this nursing home, a significant percentage of its levy to pay the bills very recently. And now we're going to write them another check for $300,000. This is an alarming escalation. Now, I don't understand the pushback as the numbers that TCM continues to show us show that they're going to be able to pay the fed and that everything's going to be fine. And if those numbers are as solid as the people who claim they are solid, then they should have no problem supporting this. Because at the end of the day, it's about accountability. There is no accountability in this, and there is no accountability to the taxpayer. And at least showing that there's some kind of consequence to not payment should incentivize these numbers. If they're not right, then we can find out right now. But if you believe the numbers that PCM is reporting, I don't understand why we should have any issue with this amendment as presented. And that's my 2 times to talk about this. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gibbons, go ahead.
My question is more for the original resolution, so I'll withdraw.
Okay, Mr. Fleegle, go ahead. This is on amendment.
This is on the whole,
Well, it should be on amendment.
well, the amendment also affects the amendment. I'm coming from right now, I'll be honest, sitting here, I don't know, which I'm going on this. Going back, we look at a few board members that have been here as long as I've gone back. And I remember interfund loan that was done in this county years ago when it went from the nursing home to the general fund. And like, I don't remember everything, the accountability of what happened when it didn't get paid back. I eventually went back, but it was a mess. In that time, it was when they were setting on several, some funds in the nursing home, and general fund, and it took a while to get it back. Well, this is a different situation because of the nursing home, we got to pay our bills. If we don't pay our bills, we have more of a problem. I feel than we did with the general fund, interfunding loan. So I agree, we have to have accountability. But I sit here right now, and I just don't know which way I'm going, because I think I agree. We have to have some accountability to know if everything works right. The one's there, but it's a good point. But it's a difficult decision we have to make. Sarah, thank you.
Mr. Newton, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chairman, I no disrespect to you. I just think that this particular version of the resolution takes us out of the loop for being able to make a decision, to put all that in your hands. Again, no disrespect to you, but I just think we're all elected officials and we should all have a choice based on what we see and what happens at each meeting as this resolution is brought forth and what it represents. Thank you.
Mr. Rohr, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not going to vote for this amendment, but I'd like to encourage my fellow board members to do the same. I believe this amendment exists to continue to throw chaos in this situation. The chaos is the whole point here. And because of that, we should not vote for it. Thank you.
Ms. Bradshaw,
Thank you.
go ahead.
I'm not in favor of this amendment. I do believe accountability is a good thing, but in this type of resolution, and since I have not seen that accountability in other resolutions for interfund loans, I'm not sure this is actually fitting. I do appreciate the effort that Mr. Miller put into writing this up. But I guess I would rather not have that phrase in there as a threat to sell the home because interfund loan can't be paid promptly. I do believe it is our fiduciary duty to pay our bills on time, but I don't believe that there should be a penalty so steep and threatening as what that last paragraph is, be it for the result of failure of paying, that the home would have to be sold. That's all.
Okay, Mr. Brand, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in my short tenure on this board, I think this is the 3rd time that nursing home has come to the board and asked for money. Each time there has been some sort of excuse given. Call that a reason or call it an excuse, but there has been something cited as to reason why we find ourselves with this crossroads. And yet, that excuse for that reasoning was always going to be, well, in 30 or 60 days, we're gonna have this resolved. The projections are going to be that we're have it behind us. And yet, here we are again, and we're out of money. We need yet another loan. A loan is not what the nursing home needs. You need either more income, less expense, preferably both. But it is not another loan. I'm gonna be supporting this amendment. And without this amendment, I cannot vote for the other. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Wire, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only time that this amendment will take effect is if they do not make payments. And if they believe that the nursing home is gonna be solid and gonna make payments, then this becomes irrelevant. I gather that there's a big concern that the nursing home is not going to be able to make the payments. And then, okay, what's your alternative for accountability? If you don't like this accountability, how should they be accountable if they don't take it? I would support this.
Mr. George, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. I just see this amendment as a stopgap, there's no wall rolling down the hill. And that, no disrespect, but that's no wall rolling down the hill to the chaos. The way these interfund loan is put together, I don't think we checked everything, and that's another issue. I have to support this thing, or I cannot support the other. Or I don't know, I can support the other way there, but this, we have to stop the bleeding. We're going to be in such a big hole that we're going to be not able to fund the other department. The other department, we're going to be not going to do wow. So thank you.
Okay, any more? I see no more discussion. Madam Clerk, call roll, please.
Garrett Miller. Jerry Clay.
Yes.
Samuel Newton. Ronnie Bush.
No.
Deb Devine.
No.
Charles Hilton.
No.
Casey Anthony.
No.
Dale Diddens.
Yes.
Kurt Copeland.
Yes.
Kevin Toomson.
Yes.
Erica Monroe.
Yes.
Ron Flegel.
Yes.
Alvin Wire.
Yes.
Larry Jokers.
Yes.
Nicole Baker.
Yes.
Scott Helms.
Aye.
Sally Bradshaw.
No.
Brian Brandt.
Aye.
Daniel Roy.
No.
William Hadley.
No.
Oh, yes, please, no.
Okay, so now we have to approve the amendment as amended. Miss Anthony, go ahead.
Thank you. So I would just like to point out that I did reach out to our treasurer and finance director and ask specifically if there was anything else I should take into consideration, and none of those issues were brought forward. Otherwise, I would have absolutely done so, and I would expect that our finance director would have done that. I also questioned if there are other funds that could be used, specifically funds we've used in the past, maybe Social Security and perhaps IMRF, and was told no, as those are restricted funds. So I did explore other options and did ask if there's anything else that should be considered. The other things I did want to bring up when we're talking about the nursing home being chaos and the snowball effect, I do want to remind everybody that as of July 31st, our revenues were 51.16% and our expenses were at 51.05%. So our budget is still on track, as well as TCM's projections are on track to have be positive at the end of the year. Also, just another reminder that when we're talking about the October 1st increase in pay, that's not included in the projections because we do not have an exact amount and because we don't have that information, none of that is included. But we can expect approximately, at best guess, an additional $40,000 a month, October, November, December. So further showing the ability for the nursing home to not only be able to repay this, but then also to end up in the black at the end of the year, which I think is what everybody's goal is. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Helm, go ahead.
Well, if you had a chance to go through the two spreadsheets that was emailed out today by both our county clerk and our administrator from TCM forecasting, they have a positive net balance of $18,461.01, regardless of whether the interfund loan is approved or not. Obviously, the interfund loan is to get us over the hump for the next 60 days or so, excuse me, but if you looked at it, there's several weeks that even with the interfund loan, the fund still goes negative, which is understandable. But having a surplus of $18,000 at the end of the year without taking into account the increase in health insurance, without taking into the account of the capital needs that still need to be done before winter, it's not viable. Those numbers have to be greater. It's just that simple. And this is the third Band-Aid. I really felt that when we decided as a board not to, forgive me, I don't recall if it was not to list or not to sell. I thought, you know what, let's try to make this work and figure it out, which was why we pushed forward with the advance on the levy. And I thought this will do it. This will get us over the hump. Because TCM, when they started, said, give us a couple of weeks, we'll get it figured out. Understandably, that was aggressive and not realistic. So then we deferred the payment in July to many of the vendors, pushed it back, even to the county. Still not going to do it. So now we have to do an interfund loan, which regardless of whether we do it or not, we still end up with an ending cash balance forecasted of $18,461 going into the next fiscal year. That is not a recipe for success by any stretch. And when I hear people talk about fiduciary responsibility, it's right here. This is it. And this is not viable. This needs to stand on its own as it was created. It can't. And I wish it could, because I'm getting tired of talking about it. And people are getting tired of hearing about it. But I still, if this number were the original number, which I don't have in front of me, and I don't even want to guess, but I'm thinking it's more than 6 figures, the original cash flow projection by the end of the year. If we were close to that, that's one thing, but we're not. $18,000. And if you go back, because I found an error the first time they sent this out, they're actually going to be ahead on ending cash without the loan. $26,000 as opposed to $18,000. But they're projecting an $8,498, I guess you call it a stipend, something that's going to come in September and again in November. If for some reason all the stars don't align and that doesn't come in, now we're talking about $1,400 surplus at the end of the year instead of $18,000. It's just baffling to me. I don't know where it stops. I mean, it's, you know, as far as the debt certificates are concerned, maybe I have an unfair advantage because I am a banker and that's the first thing I look at is the covenants and the restrictions. But to simply say I asked somebody and they didn't bring it up, and you're good with that, my constituents aren't good with that. They expect me to do the job and not to reach out to the other taxing districts. I'm thinking ahead, which we talked about. Extending this TIF district, you've got to get all of them on board. So why wouldn't we talk to them if we're thinking about doing this? And you sure as heck got to get the legislators on board. Because if they don't go to Springfield and plead our case, again, a board down the road is going to have to deal with our problem. And to me, this is my guess, because I've not talked to all the tax districts, I've talked to a few. If you don't do this the right way, you are just condemning the future board to deal with this problem. And it's irresponsible. I see there's others that want to talk, so I'll stop.
Mr. Diddens, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask Mr. Larson what his opinion is on Mr. Hall's concerns, you know, the legality of that.
I haven't looked into any of that, and it's not something that I'm independently familiar with.
All right, thank you. I understand that.
Mr. Jorges, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, hearing this discussion, you know, about the funding and where this is coming from, and not checking on checking with the banks, basically. I think we really ought to seriously talk about tabling this thing until we get the facts straight. We may be getting ourselves into trouble. The other big concern,
The other thing that it keeps going on here, this is probably the fifth floor that the nursing home is being pushed down upon them. And if we don't realize that the marketplace has changed, when this thing was originally started with 50% capacity in the county, then probably the library was in this business. We should get out of it. We could have sold it the first time we had that $3 million offer. And everybody thought that we had to have a 5. Well, we should have took 3. So I cannot support this.
Go ahead, Ms. Show.
Thank you. I guess I don't need to remind the board that they voted down the sale of the home in the past, and we agreed as a board and voted to hire a business to manage our county nursing home. For most of you would agree that as a board, we are not good at managing a nursing home according to what has happened in the past. So let us remember this, 84 days. TCM has only had management for 84 days. I'm not sure about you, but I know you can't turn the ship around in 84 days where you have debt, you have problems, you have low census. In 84 days, they've made a lot of positive changes. They've come up with business plans for treating, for memory care unit. They've begun that training already. They have another wing ready for more residents. Census is going up. It's up to 59. Well, the last count they told me, I didn't check with that today, and I do apologize. I didn't know I'd have to even come up with that figure. But census is going up. Part of the business plan in order to pay your bills is to have enough residents covered and enough income coming in to pay those bills adequately. Again, bring up fiduciary duty. I am on the nursing center board committee, I should say. I am on the Stephenson County board, and we have to pay our bills. I do know that we are looking for that legal standing on whether we are obligated to pay our nursing home bills, and that's a legal opinion that is going to be forthcoming. Medicare is currently being billed by TCM. It took a long time, several weeks, for them to get that number that the state requires for them to do the legal billing for Medicare. It just began, I believe, about a week ago, the last time we had our meeting, that they were able to begin that billing. There again, it has to be in sequential order, which means if they have old bills outstanding for certain people, they have to bill those first. They have to wait for that payment to come in on that specific month in order to bill for the next month. So it takes time. They can't just bill for the whole entire amount, which is, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They can bill it only in sequential order for those people. So right now we're talking about an interfund loan. We are borrowing to extend receipt of accounts payable. I run a business. I'm not a banker, and with all respect to Scott, he is much better at numbers than I am. But even as a small business owner, I know that sometimes you have to borrow from another fund in order to make bills payable. To make accounts receivable that haven't come in you have to transfer from another fund to cover your bills. There again, I had to pay my bills during the COVID epidemic, and it wasn't easy when our governor had a moratorium on evictions, saying we couldn't evict people for non-payment. My income was payment of rental income. So I had to borrow from other funds within my business to pay my bills. It's my fiduciary duty to pay my bills, so I didn't have to unhouse all my other people. So as a county board member, and also being on the committee for the nursing home, I believe it's our duty to pay our bills. An interfund loan is not unfathomable. Other counties do this as well. It's a short term. We are borrowing to extend receipt of accounts payable, money that's already owed us, that's coming. I agree that this amendment is maybe looking for a little bit answer. I can't say I agree with the fact that it was approved, but it's a done deal. So I still think we need to pay our bills, and I hope that you vote tonight for this resolution even with the amendment. Thank you.
Mr. Bryant, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a question for anyone in this room who can answer. I would like to know what the year-to-date profit or loss is for the nursing home.
Are you talking from January 1st?
Yes,
We do have Mr. Filippo on the line as well. But the spreadsheet should show. I mean, that's up to date, so that's current as far as what has been owed and what has been received, and it goes, but it, it only starts from when we started. But it goes into their actual, so, no, it would be the actual for August 19th would be the most recent.
because
Well, there's no profit. Okay, for there to be profit, that means all your bills need to be paid. Bills there's bills that are still outstanding from July. So there was no profit.
if I'm going to get out of the hole, the first thing I have to do is quit digging. I don't know how deep the hole is because no one can tell me what my year-to-date loss is. And yet I'm supposed to approve additional funding. I have a real trouble with that.
Can I just quickly answer something? Is that okay?
Yes.
I believe the finance director sends out a spreadsheet, and I think the treasurer sent it today, but the finance director is not working today. That's going to show you your ending cash balance. Okay, as of today, I think that is when they sent it. I think there's a deposit today, and then there's part of the accounts payable that was also paid.
But correct me if I'm wrong, that's the cash balance of a bank account.
That's all there is.
That's all there is. Okay,
Okay,
thank you, Mr.
okay, Mr.
Can I make a comment there? This is Mike Filippo.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so number one, that's a great question. Is there profit? Is there not profit? And the answer is no one in the room, including myself, could answer that without some extensive research. The building, the property has been, what the numbers that we see every week are on a cash basis. So it means what money's come in and how much is going out. I mean, today we're paying for sins of the past. We have, I think, 2 checks going out to HFS every month because of unpaid bed taxes and an audit from 2012. In a normal business, those checks would not be recorded in the profit loss of the current year because they're for a prior period issue. And so one of the problems, and we're still working through it on the expenses, are what are the true expenses every month that are not tied to past sins? And so whatever we're looking at today and what we've been looking at for the last year, we're looking at a cash basis system. So we all know from the day Excalibur took over, there was not anywhere near enough cash collected. They hardly collected any more than the private pay money, and they didn't collect all of that. So even if the nursing home was at 100 census and on paper making money, we'd be losing money because we're not collecting the money. So that the answer to the question is, we have to narrow those parameters. What we're used to is recording things on an accrual basis. And I can tell you today, from an accrual standpoint, this nursing home is not losing what it was losing at one time, and it's not losing much, if anything at all. And with an October 1st increase, we'll probably be making money at the current census. So there is no money pit anymore. The money pit is all tied to past issues, not current issues. While I'm here, I would like to correct a couple things. When we first met and we first came on with our management contract, we were sitting in the nursing home committee meeting, and the nursing home committee was about to vote or discuss or recommend. I don't know how the vote would have gone, but was on the floor was approving a $750,000 interfund loan. Our comment wasn't that this is never going to be needed. Our comment was, we don't need that much right now. We may never need that much. So let's kick it down the road a couple weeks. A little bit different version than you heard a few minutes ago. And that's what we've been doing ever since, is kicking it down the road. And so in the end, because we had, again, stepped on some landmines from the past, we're now talking about a $380,000 loan, not a $750,000 loan. I know that's still not good, but it's actually progress from where everyone was several months ago, or back in June. This payment about 88,000 or so that Mr. Helms talked about, what if it doesn't come in? I also sent an attachment with the other two cash projections. That money is in stone. I sent a report that had that exact amount that's already been allocated by HFS. And they're going to, according to them, they're getting the payments out very quickly, which should mean in the next 2 weeks. And I think we put it out 2 weeks. As far as the let's take the worst case scenario. The interfund loan doesn't get paid back, not a penny, which I don't think is going to happen, obviously, but you're sitting on a $5 million asset. So what, from a business perspective, what are you worried about? That money's going to get, no, it's not going to get back before the end of the year, which I know could cause problems, but you're sitting on a $5 million asset. So you can always sell it at some point and get your interfund loan money back plus more. So that's my speech for now.
Mr. Helms, go ahead.
I thought Mr. Newton was up before me.
Okay, I apologize. You go ahead and then I'll go to Mr. Helms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I don't think I'm on here.
I got to
Just
see if your picture, oh, hit the button on your, no, that other button.
thank you. Only comment I wanted to make is that, in the past, we never had a problem with borrowing money to make sure that the county stayed broke. We borrowed money just recently to take care of some police cars and whatnot for the sheriff department. We borrowed money to put things on top of buildings, air conditioning. We borrowed money to expand our ITs. We borrow money, and usually when we have our finance and treasurer take a look at what our budget is for the year, they make a decision to get a tax anticipation loan so that days like this, when we're sitting in a meeting that we shouldn't be in the middle of the summer, because quite frankly, they're not over budget. They're still on track. And so things can happen. Life happens, stuff happens. And so they do go over budget. But by the end of the year, we start to balance our books, start to figure out where we are, and we pay bills that maybe went over budget. In fact, you're gonna pay some other bills in some other departments. I'm wondering what you're gonna do. Are you gonna close the sheriff if he decides to go over budget for some unforeseen reason? Is you're not gonna close anything. You're gonna figure out how to move money where you need to move it. And if that means to get a loan, interfund loan, which if we didn't go to the bank, we didn't lose any money on interest, then that's the best way to go. That's what we've always said the last several years. You don't want the tax anticipation loan to balance the books to the end of the year. So if you do borrow money internally, well, today we're asking to borrow money internally until we get to a point where it's time for us to plan as we're going into our new budget year for the next year. So I'm a little perturbed that we're going through this process right now. It's not even the end of the year. We're upset that we're playing recovery after the pandemic and after saw a bunch of situations that we all know about. So thank you. Let's get this thing paid. Let's keep moving forward. Thank you.
Mr. Helms, go ahead.
So the squad cars and the HVAC system, it was my idea to lease those. It wasn't a loan. It was to lease because interest was so low and I had cash flow concerns. But the beauty of that lease is there is a built-in repayment structure through the COVID dollars instead of paying cash flow. So while I don't necessarily disagree on the whole, but fundamentally it's not the same. As far as what Mr. Filippo talked about when they came on, the $750,000 interfund loan policy he's talking about. After I brought up doing the advance on the levy, we talked about it, and I asked, how much do we need? And it's dead silence, which of course, the committee should have come up with that amount. So I asked Shannon, how much do we need? She wasn't sure. She said, 2 months. How much is 2 months? About 750,000. That's where we got that number. That wasn't a county thing. That wasn't the committee. That was the administrator, which it should be. She's the professional. She's the one we're paying to understand what we need. But at no time, at least correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember discussing, or maybe I shouldn't say discussing, but committees to a funding mechanism on where we could get that money. And if we did, correct me, but I don't remember saying, yes, we're going to take from fund, whatever it was. And as far as talking about cash and accrual, I agree that if you're paying your bills, accrual is the way to go because you really understand what you're doing and you're not doing. The numbers keep changing month to month. And that's a problem. And maybe so, maybe the nursing home is on track for budget. It's real simple to figure out which unbudgeted item we've had so far in 2022. You can look at the budget of what we approved and look at what the accounts payable are and how much, and then we've had to come back. And the reality of the situation is we do have to pay for the sins of the past because we are a governmental agency. That's how it works. Private companies, sure, you can write it off and move on. This isn't a private company, so we've got different rules to play by. I would like to make an amendment to this resolution. And this goes to what happens in the event that the nursing home is not able to make any one of these 4 days. It reads, if funds or any portion thereof are not repaid by the dates stated, the remaining outstanding balance shall be repaid before any other budgeted or non-budgeted expense is paid through the normal claims process.
Do I have a second on that? Second. Second by Mr. Cole-Queen, I'm clear, and then Mr. Helms to explain. Let me clear, okay, go ahead, Mr. Helms.
Well, I'll admit it may not be perfect, but I'd like to have a funding mechanism in place because I don't want to rely on a 6 to 12 month decision by the board as to whether or not who they're going to sell to, if they're going to sell. This TIF fund, if it's used, if that's passed, this has to be repaid. And any delay, just using the money is problematic because of what this fund was created for and who's involved with it. But to not have it repaid as soon as possible to show that we're doing what we can, it will be detrimental to getting this TIF renewed. So, you know, I'm welcome if anybody wants to clean it up. I'm welcome to any suggestions. It was pretty quick just thinking about it. There has to be something other than selling and nothing.
Can you read it one more time, please?
Yes.
If funds or any portion thereof are not repaid by the dates stated, the remaining outstanding balance shall be repaid before any other budgeted or non-budgeted expenses are paid through the claims process.
Okay, Mr. White, go ahead. Does that mean that the payment would be priority over the electric and heat bills?
That's my intent. It would be top of the list.
Mr. Anthony, go ahead.
You mean the remaining balance due for that payment or the remaining outstanding balance?
I would be fine with the payment. and stipulates that.
Mr. Newton, go ahead.
I think it's kind of an answer, but does that also mean if above paying payroll as well?
My intent was top of the list.
Sorry.
Okay. Any more discussion on this amendment? I see none. Madam Clerk, call the roll, please.
Scott Helms,
Aye.
Sally Rashbaugh, Brian Brown, Daniel Dorr,
No.
Eric Miller,
Aye.
Jerry Cotter,
Aye.
Daniel Newton, Ronnie Bush,
No.
Kathy Barney,
No.
Charles Hilton,
No.
Casey Anthony,
No.
Dale Dibbens,
Aye.
Kurt Copeland,
Aye.
Kevin Johnson,
Aye.
Erica Monroe,
Aye.
Ron Legal,
No.
Meyer,
No.
Larry Jokers,
Aye.
Nicole Baker, William Hadley,
No.
then
That fails, we're back to the original motion. Mr. Newton,
Just have, it fails.
yes, it failed.
So my question, is, what happens if you don't pay employees and we get sued? I know we got.
No, it failed.
Okay.
Yes, okay, Miss Anthony, go ahead.
We're back to the original motion, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
as amended, yes.
correct, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that we are talking about a healthcare facility. And so there is an obligation, a moral obligation to take care of the residents that are out there. And so paying bills, and paying for the services so that services can continue is the exact intent of this interfund loan. Because we've talked about it before, but without it, if bills aren't paid, services may stop. We have vendors right now who are waiting for payments pending the approval of an interfund loan. So these are people, vulnerable residents, many of them from our county who've lived here for the majority, if not all of their lives. They're depending on those services. We have a moral obligation to do so. When you're talking about healthcare, there's liability issues too. I don't know, Georgia, if you want to speak a little bit to your conversation with Baird, that's relevant to that.
That's your mic on.
I did have a conversation with Baird earlier today, and the primary question that I focused on with them was if the non-payment to vendors would affect our bond rating. Of course, a direct answer couldn't be given, but they said that in essence, whenever non-payment to vendors is done, if it creates bad press, that could reflect poorly on the county.
Thank you, Ms. Newcomer. And so there's lots of other things that play, including just, we reached about other things too. What is the liability from the county board or the liability from as us as personal county board members if something were to happen in the home because we are not paying the bills? Right, so this interfund loan, I would really urge everyone to approve so that the bills can be paid out there tomorrow, so that all of the services can continue. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. George, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a reminder to everybody that nursing home is not a mandated function of the county government. The sheriff's department is, so we have to have that. I don't think anybody's talking about not taking care of the beach. That we need to pay our bills, but we did that. We've got some serious concern about borrowing in the TIF fund. We know if we legally can do it. I have a serious concern about that. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Helms, go ahead.
So I would like to have, the debt certificates and security agreements, researched, see if there's any covenants or restrictions against us using these funds for this purpose. I would also like to have someone from the county administrator, I suppose, reach out to all 9 taxing districts to get their opinion on this, and also reach out to our current state legislators to see where they sit on it. Using these particular funds, again, I'm not necessarily advocating against the merit fund loan, but I cannot vote for this without knowing this. You talk about liability. If there are any covenants, restrictions on that security agreement that don't allow us to use that money that way, you can be sure State Bank will be suing the county. So I would make a motion to lay this over until that can be found out. And if you want to wait till a regular scheduled meeting, that's fine. Or if you want to plan another meeting, that's fine too.
Second. Okay, second, pardon me. Mr. Miller made it, and they're way over, there can be discussion on way over. Yes, go ahead, this is on discussion on way over. I cleared the lights, Ms. Anthony, go ahead.
The bills need to be paid right away. I'm not gonna repeat what I said, but I am concerned that these issues weren't brought up before when I asked. I don't have a knowledge base, that's why we're a board of all different kinds of professionals. I know, Mr. Helms, that you researched some other things yourself. I'm not sure why you didn't bring this to me earlier. Certainly, I'd like to believe that we can work together and not bring things up at the county board for sale. That's something I, certainly we would have done had we known. I don't know, again, I guess I assumed our finance director would have suggested that. But said that we're gonna wait for the TIF attorney to respond, and hopefully that was positive, and so we didn't have to do anything else. Is the response I got. And so that does really frustrate me that all of this is going on at a board meeting, when perhaps this could have been addressed earlier. Thank you.
Mr. Duke, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. We just wasted a whole exercise on trying to get a resolution changed to support the way you think it should read. And so now that it's supported, we're gonna just stop the whole motion and not pay the bills. There's a lot of, there's a lot of games being played here. And so, Mr. Chairman, I don't know what to say other than pay the bills so we can move on. Thank you.
Mr. Helms, go ahead.
I'm certainly not playing any games. I thought we'd work together too, but you sent an email out to certain people, including the chairman, but not the rest of the board, talking about how you've been working behind the scenes to identify a fund. Anybody else on the board know that before the agenda went out? I mean, there's poor planning on your part is not an emergency on mine. I mean, my God, we've all got responsibilities here. And because I thought of this, and it doesn't matter when I thought of it, a lot of this just yesterday. You researched it, so you worked with Chairman Hadley to identify a fund. I assume that meant everything was considered. Obviously, it's not. And all I'm asking is find another fund if you want to do that tonight, so that we don't jeopardize this TIF. That's all I'm asking. I'm not saying don't pay the bills. What's the backup plan? It's the epitome of what's wrong with this nursing home. There is none. Never is one. This is it or nothing. Find another fund.
Mr. Miller, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it's not just the case, there's no kind of support. There is no offense, it's reactive. And we need to pay the bills. No argument about that. I agree with Mr. Helm, I say that a lot. But I agree with Mr. Helm, the bills need to be paid. We all know that at the end of the day, the bills are gonna get paid. We're gonna get laid on top of that, fines and attorney's fees and all that fun stuff. But to once again put a Band-Aid on an amputation, for want of a better explanation, with the hope that this is gonna all get better, and the bills are all gonna get paid and stuff. We have lived in a hypothetical world for too long. The reality is, the bills need to be paid. So the very thought that we have to use a different fund kills this conversation. Bring forth another fund that doesn't have long-term ramifications for boards down the road. I mean, Millrace Crossing is hanging by a thread to begin with, and you are further jeopardizing the future of that and further jeopardizing the financial stability of the county. Surely there are other funds that can be considered. I would support another fund if that's fund is supported, but to throw it on this fund without doing the due diligence necessary. Listen, I don't necessarily look into the consequences of not paying my loans all that closely, because I have every expectation of paying. Scott, on the other hand, looks at these things because he has tendency to have to deal with people who don't get loans. I'm almost certain that there's going to be some kind of stipulation in there saying that we can't cross collateralize further something we've already collateralized, which is effectively what we're doing. We're loaning money to the nursing home. My amendment, such as it stands, was an attempt to collateralize the nursing home as an asset against this debt. I am almost certain that the TIF grant is collateralized already. And so we are going to dig into that collateral without talking to bankers. Seems like a very irresponsible decision to make. And that's what I was saying this afternoon.
Ms. Anthony, go ahead.
I would have loved to have brought forth another fund. In fact, this has been on the nursing home committee agenda for several months now. And we discussed where other funds could come from, and I am only one person, and the committee didn't have anything to say, and Mr. Helms, you're on that committee. We've talked to the treasurer, we've talked to the finance director. I asked them just recently again if there was any other fund. And I'm not being given any answers. Initially, in the initial resolution for an interfund loan, we had suggested the general fund, which ain't a very general thing. We've asked where it could come from the general fund, and have gotten no answer other than funds that we suggested are restricted funds. So it's not like I just made this decision on my own. I brought it up in committee, it's been on the agenda. I tried to reach out to other people to get ideas. And this was the only one that I got a positive response from. Thank you.
Mr. Newton, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I'll come and speak over there. You know, it's amazing to me that we're even sitting here again on say this, because why are we paying a finance director? What do we need a treasurer for if they don't know what the funds are even borrowed? Why do we gotta guess? Why are they on payroll? Why do we have a counselor that only can answer questions when it's convenient? What are they there for if they can't know that these things are gonna happen? They're already talking. Maybe the answer is you just don't want to do it. But the bottom line is there are other funds, you just didn't suggest them. Well, we're everyday citizens in here voted to represent people. And we depend on our department heads to give us great answers. But when they give us no answers, it just leaves you scratching your head. Or putting your head down because you don't want to do the work that's in front of you. They are there to do the work. So give us some suggestions. And you said the only thing we came up with was one fund. Well, that sounds funny to me because we find money when everything else breaks in the county. You find a way to do it. And you come up with more than one way to do it. Even if you have to borrow for a moment or get money from the bank. Everything in America seems to show up at our door when we want to get something. That needs, and this is a problem or a service that we need to take care of, whether we like it or not. We need to approve this resolution. And you already tightened the grip on what the resolution says can happen, so the chips will fall where they may. But us to sit here and keep on beating a dead horse, we gotta pay the bills, or else there are gonna be other things like possibly lawsuits, right, Councilman? Because if somebody gets hurt, we're gonna be figuring out where we're gonna get that money that we get sued for is gonna come from. So let's pay bills, let's do what we gotta do, and let's live to see another tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, I see no more discussion. Madam Clerk, call roll on the layover.
Scott Helms,
Aye.
Sally Bradshaw, Brian Brandt, Daniel Rohr,
No.
Derek Miller,
Aye.
Jerry Clay,
Yes.
Samuel Newton, Ronnie Bush,
No.
Deb Devine, Charles Hilton, Casey Anthony.
No.
Dale Diddens.
No.
Kurt Copeland.
Aye.
Kevin Johnson.
Aye.
Erica Monroe.
Aye.
Ron Flegel.
No.
Alvin Wire.
Yes.
Larry Jokers.
Aye.
Nicole Baker.
Aye.
William Hadley.
No. That fails. Okay, we're back to the original motion with the amendment. Mr. Newton, go ahead.
All the questions. Just go ahead and vote.
Okay, do I have a second on all the question? Second by Ms. Anthony. Madam Clerk, call roll for all the question.
Samuel Newton.
Aye.
Ronnie Bush.
Aye.
Doug Devine.
Aye.
Charles Hilton. Casey Anthony.
Aye.
Dale Diddens.
Aye.
Kurt Copeland.
Aye.
Kevin Johnson.
Aye.
Erica Monroe. Ron Flegel.
Aye.
Alvin Wire.
Yes.
Larry Jokers.
Aye.
Nicole Baker. Scott Helms. Sally Bradshaw. Brian Grant. Daniel Moore.
Aye.
Eric Miller. Jerry Clay.
No.
William Hadley.
Aye. 19-1. Okay, Madam Clerk, call roll on the original motion as amended.
Casey Anthony. Dale Diddens. Kurt Copeland.
Aye.
Kevin Johnson.
No.
Erica Monroe. Ron Flegel.
Aye.
Alvin Wire.
Yes.
Larry Jokers.
No.
Nicole Baker. Scott Helms.
What's this vote on?
This is the resolution as amended.
As amended. As amended. I'm not sure everybody understood that. I will vote no.
Sally Bradshaw. Brian Grant.
No.
Daniel Rohr.
Aye.
Eric Miller.
Aye.
Jerry Clay.
No.
Samuel Newton. Ronnie Bush.
Aye.
Doug Devine. Charles Hilton.
Aye.
William Hadley.
Yes.
Jeans.
14-6. I have motion to adjourn. By Mr. Miller, second by Mr. Dale. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All